So, today we're going to dig into the origin of a really powerful economic idea. And what's wild is that it didn't come from some fancy boardroom or a university. Nope. It came from a group of hungry, totally fed up workers back in the 1840s. And their solution, well, it would go on to reshape communities all around the globe. You know, to really get this, let me just ask you a question. What if you and your neighbors owned the local grocery store, or the bank, or even the power company? Just imagine for a second if, instead of making profits for some far-off investors, that business was designed from the ground up to benefit you. And that right there, that's the heart of the cooperative model. So before we jump into the incredible story of how it all started, let's just quickly break down what makes this idea so different. At its core, a cooperative is really just a group of people who voluntarily get together to meet a common need. The whole thing is built on a really simple, powerful principle: mutual help. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. A typical business, right? It's all about maximizing profit for outside investors. The more shares you own, the more say you have. Simple. But a cooperative, it flips that script completely. Its whole reason for being is to serve its members, the very people who use it. And power isn't tied to how much money you have. It's democratic. It's one member, one vote, period. So where did this kind of revolutionary idea come from? Well, it wasn't from an economist or some famous philosopher. It came from 28 weavers in a small English town who were frankly pushed to their breaking point. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in the middle of industrial England. Factory workers are making terrible wages, and to make things worse, they're often forced to buy their food and supplies from company-owned stores. These places charged crazy high prices for really bad quality food. We're talking food that was often adulterated, which is a nice way of saying it was mixed with junk, like chalk to bulk it up. And for most people, there was just no other choice. But in the middle of all this hardship, one small group decided they'd had enough. A group of just 28 ordinary people. The year was 1844, and in a town called Rochdale, the modern cooperative movement was about to be born. And this timeline just lays it out perfectly. They had a huge problem: total exploitation. Their solution? It was brilliant because it was so simple. They pooled whatever little money they had, about £1 each, to open their own little grocery store. They called it the Rochdale Pioneer Society. And the result was a game changer. They sold honest goods, real butter, sugar, flour, at fair prices. And get this, any profits left over were returned to the members. But the Rochdale pioneers did something even more important than just opening a store. They basically created a blueprint, a set of guiding principles so that anyone, anywhere, could copy their model of fairness and democracy. You can think of this as their operating manual. The first rule, voluntary and open membership, was radical. It meant anyone could join, no matter their social class or background. Then came democratic member control. That's the one member, one vote rule we talked about. You also had member economic participation, meaning members put money in and shared in the profits. And a principle like concern for community made sure the co-op works to make life better for everyone in town, not just its own members. It was basically a business model with a conscience built right in. And that's really the crucial point here. It didn't matter if you were the wealthiest person in the group or the poorest. Inside that cooperative, your voice was equal. This democratic idea was the absolute bedrock of their new economic world. You know an idea is powerful when it just can't be contained. And by the late 1800s, the Rochdale model started spreading like wildfire across Europe. Over in Germany, the idea started to evolve. Some pioneers there adapted the model for another huge problem: getting access to credit. A guy named F.W. Reifeson created a version for rural credit co-ops to help out farmers, while Harman Schulze de Leech did the same thing for city artisans. They basically invented the forerunner to the modern credit union that many of us use today. So, from that one tiny shop in Rochdale, a global movement was born. And it continues to shape our world in ways we might not even realize. Look, this history is fascinating, for sure, but it brings up a really important question. Why does an idea from 1844 still matter today? Well, as it turns out, it might matter more than ever. I mean, the legacy of those 28 weavers is just immense. They kicked off a global movement that gives communities the power to control their own economic destinies. They laid the groundwork for the credit unions and co-op banks millions of us use. But most importantly, they proved that a business can be successful by putting people first, not just profits. And that really just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In a world that's facing some pretty huge economic challenges, is it possible that this nearly 200-year-old idea of mutual help and democratic ownership could offer a blueprint for a fairer, more inclusive future? What do you think?